What is up, gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode on the channel. On today's episode, I want to quickly answer the question: should men care about fashion? Should they care about how they dress and how they present themselves to the world? If you're between the ages of 25, 35 to 40, you probably grew up with the paradigm that men should not care about how they dress, that this is often seen as effeminate. But if you care about this stuff, then you're less of a man. But men have always historically cared about what they looked like. Masculine values and virtues have always been signaled through uniforms, through what we dress. In the past, the warrior class itself, the warrior class, the real men, the people that we always have looked up to in media and history, these are the people that cared about how they dressed the most. The key issue is that most modern day men believe that they only dress for function. They dress for the idea that when I dress, I want to be comfortable. They don't believe that they can have both form and function, that these things are mutually exclusive, but that could not be further from the truth. Specifically because there is inherent function in form, and this is what I want to get into in today's episode. Look at nature, right? Look out into nature. Look at the lion. The lion has a large mane. The peacock has tail feathers. Pufferfish, when they're threatened or when they want to attract, they puff up, they get really big. All of these are a function of the form itself, of the way that they present themselves. So historically and biologically, anything that's related to both danger and sex, we've always used the way that we present ourselves to bring out the results that we wish to have. Even historically, I'd briefly mention the warrior class. These were the people that actually cared about how they looked the most. Let's look back at the Spartans. The Spartans were well known. If you were to visualize a Spartan, you'd imagine this extremely muscular person, very well ripped, very masculine looking, but they were all dressed in these beautiful red cloaks. Why do you think that is? The key idea was that this red cloak in battle would serve as a camouflage, as a blood camouflage. That way, when these Spartans were stabbing and they were being stabbed, you could never see the blood on them. Imagine this. Imagine going to war with Spartans and doing everything you can as the opposition to try to get through and to penetrate, and noticing and not being able to visually see a sense of destruction of your enemy. Imagine what that does to demoralize you. And then from the Spartan standpoint, imagine looking around, seeing your brothers all in these beautiful red cloaks, and not a single one of them looks to be beaten or bruised or hammered down. All of this was done to signify strength, resilience, and the ability to persevere. And now, the modern day equivalent of the Spartans' majestic red cloak is the suit. 80 years ago, when we were to look back, you were not considered a man that was sort of capable of moving in the world if you weren't dressed in a suit. Anyone who was serious about their business and actually imposing their will in the world was dressed in a suit. Nowadays, not so much. This is definitely quickly dying out. If you just go look at any modern day advertising firm or any sort of tech firm, really, if you were to be dressed in a suit, you would be laughed out of the boardroom. The reality of the situation, how you dress and how you present yourself to the world, inherently says more about you than you think. Just like literacy, just how I can put a string of words together and you are able to understand what these words mean and what I'm trying to imply, right? Just as we as humans created literacy, we also created visual literacy, where the way that I dress says a lot about myself without me having to say these same things about myself. Look back at Roman times. In Roman times, they used to wear what are known as togas. The Roman people would wear these pure white togas. The magistrates would wear these off-white togas, and depending on the specific rank that these magistrates would hold, they would have them ornamented in different places. Slaves, on the other hand, in Roman cities were not allowed to wear togas, and this was just a very clear way to signify the distinctions between the different classes. And honestly, although we don't live in Roman times, we don't live in this generalized homogenous culture where we all dress the same. On the flip side, we actually dress more in what is known as a micro-tribal fashion, where we have these very segmented, splintered groups of people where the way that you dress says a lot about your very specific cases or your very specific interests, your very specific personality traits or hobbies. Just look at a gym. Even within a gym setting where everyone is wearing the same thing, or they should be wearing the same thing, you see this micro influences. You see the boxer, you see the powerlifter, you see the sprinter, you see the runner, you see X, Y, Z, and every single person is nuanced and telling a story about themselves in terms of how they dress, how they present themselves, what kind of makeup they wear, what kind of shoes they wear. All of these things are done as a function of the form of the person. The second and probably the most important function of dressing well has to do more with how you perceive yourself as opposed to how people perceive you. Just think back to when you were a kid and you were playing pretend. You were pretending to be a superhero. The first thing that you would do is either you'd put on a mask or you'd put on a cloak. The reason you were doing this is not to show your mom that you're a superhero. It was more to internalize this idea within that you are the hero that you are cloaking yourself to be. And that mindset switch in terms of what you dress and how you feel about yourself This is where the magic is. This is where the magic happens. This is why military personnel actually dress up in uniforms. It's less about the authority it signifies outwardly. It's more about what that does to the psyche of the military personnel that are dressed in their fatigues or they're dressed in their uniform. It just allows them to perceive themselves a specific way. This same exact thing is why doctors wear white lab coats. It's why the PhD wears a green cloak when they're graduating. The trick for us here is to do this mindset shift and to dress in a way that makes sense for us. To actually dress in a way that is going to enhance our lives in a way that makes sense. There's no point in me to be dressing as a ballerina, right? And just because I dress as a ballerina does not mean I'm going to be the best ballerina. That's a weird example, but trying to be very specific here. Make sure to evaluate your life, evaluate your goals. What are you trying to achieve? I'll give you guys a specific example from my specific life. 2 to 3 years ago, I really did not care about how I dressed. I used to dress as a pure function of being comfortable. I used to say that in order for me to perform well at work, I need to be extremely comfortable. So I would dress in any t-shirt, right? A jersey t-shirt. I would dress in joggers. I would dress in sneakers. It was a very laid back and casual look. And as someone leading a company, I almost lied to myself to believe that, sure, my leadership capabilities should not be about how I dress. They should be more about how I lead. And to some degree, that is correct. But at some point, there's a law of diminishing returns. I needed to be able to live the part. If I wanted to be a leader, if I wanted to be someone that people looked up to and others viewed maturely, I should have dressed as such. I should have taken on the role in terms of my attire, the way that I presented myself to the world. And little by little, I started to dress in a more formal way. And honestly, more than what anyone might have told me, at some point I didn't even care. It was the way that I started to see myself. I remember the first day, I picked up a pair of high-waisted trousers and a white shirt. It was for a wedding, and I wore it into the office the second day. And I remember just feeling that this is who I was always meant to be. And little by little, I started to expand my wardrobe. And this visual change ingrained itself. And when I say ingrained itself, I'm using that word very literally. It's literally ingrained itself into my mindset, into my psyche, into the way that I viewed every aspect of the world. It changed the way I walked, the way I talked, the way I looked, the way that I did most anything started to literally evolve by the way that I was dressing myself. Before I knew it, I went from being passive in my life to becoming the hero of my own story. And this is where the real magic lies. You should fundamentally believe that you are the hero of your own story. And I know that sounds a little bit cliche, but if you don't put yourself up on this pedestal to say, then who's going to do that? Who's going to tell you that you matter and that the things that you do on this earth are worthwhile and you should go after the things you want? Dressing a specific way allows you to be that hero, allows you to be that person that you know that you need to be to get the life that you need to live. And when you dress a specific way, you start to act a specific way. And when you start to act a specific way, others start to react to you in that specific way, and it becomes a positive feedback loop. Not only do you believe, but others start to believe, and that belief pushes your belief even further.